Welcome to Through the Firewall, conversations with Force 3 about the changing world of IT and network security.
Welcome to episode 12 of Through the Firewall. I'm Martin Thompson, and today I'm sitting down with Pete Burke, a senior technical consultant with Force 3. How's it going, Pete?
I'm doing well.
So, Snowden and Manning. These are the faces we see when we think of the phrase insider threat. We associate insider threats with intentional leaks from disgruntled employees, but that's only a small piece of the puzzle. So today we're going to talk about three specific types of insider threats, the malicious, the negligent, and the compromised. So Pete, why don't you give us an overview of what is meant when we say insider threats?
All right, so as you mentioned, insider threat has many different faces, if you want to put it that way. We're going to talk about three of those today, but to give you a better idea, insider threat is generally any type of a compromise to either a business or an organization that may have been caused by someone from within that organization or within that business. So not saying that they intentionally did it. A lot of times it's cases of stolen credentials and things like that, but it's usually somebody with the ability to access or appropriated access into an area that is going to be exploited to be able to gain either information or gain insight into an organization or whatever type of information, or even in some cases, proprietary type information, blueprint types of things, intellectual property and things like that. So there's a lot of different angles or a lot of different reasons for this type of activity, but it's typically always something that has valid credentials or validated credentials to be able to access whatever type of information they're trying to get at. The specific characteristics when you look at either the malicious, the negligent, or the compromised insider threat. So starting out with the easiest or the one that you think about the most, and going back to a Snowden and Manning case, that's definitely going to be one that's just completely malicious. They're doing it with the intent of pulling information out and being able to share that with outside sources, or to give that information over to another party or a third party that it wasn't meant for. In those cases, it happened to be, government secrets, and you see not even in just cases where information is coming out from them, but you see a lot of different examples. If you just look at WikiLeaks and look at the amount of information that's out there, a lot of it is government, some of it is not. A lot of it is different commercial entities and people that, maybe an employee, former employee, people that have a grudge against, another, person or entity, and airing out dirty laundry, or putting information out there that's going to potentially be harmful or have a negative impact to a company or an organization, whether or not it's within public trust, or whether or not it may be on the bottom line, looking at stock prices or things like that, things that are negatively going to impact a company or an organization. The second type of insider threat that we're talking about today is just negligence. It's typically a situation where an employee doesn't know, or maybe they may not be informed, or they haven't been trained properly on how to use a system, or in other cases it may be a developer who doesn't know enough, or security isn't enforced within either the development process or within their code checking, the QA process when they're going through before a piece of software or something is released that may have vulnerabilities in it that are able to be exploited. In most cases, though, it tends to be uninformed users, or users that don't really understand the importance and what their role is within corporate security or organizational security, where to put it plainly, they think that 16 character passwords are dumb, and they don't know why they have to keep changing their password every 90 days, and why can't I just write it on a post-it note and stick it on my computer monitor, because it makes it easy to find then, and I know I won't get locked out of my machine. It's just making it harder for me to be able to do my job because of all these security measures in place. Well, they're there for a reason, and when you have users that either are lazy or they lack the understanding of why they're there, that tends to lead to negligence, where you have the users with their passwords on a sticky note or something on their keyboard where someone can easily get it, or they're using very weak passwords or the same password in multiple systems across multiple domains, however you want to look at it, to where it's something that somebody could guess. If I know, for example, Martin, if you live on Madison Street, and I could pick out, well, maybe your password might be your address, or it may be part of your zip code, or a combination of your birthday, or something that you could easily just either within looking at a couple bits of information about a person, kind of pick out their passwords, or different patterns that they would use for passwords. So that's something that it's usually because the person is misinformed or not informed to the point to where they have an understanding of why those measures are in place, but just trying to make things easier on themselves, and it tends to leave them in a position where they could be compromised, where their identity could be compromised.
Right. So you're saying I shouldn't be using Martin123 as my password?
No, or password 123. Lowercase or uppercase P doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. And if I guess, so to give a good example of this, right? So one of the biggest complaints is having, password complexity, and talking about insider threat, and it typically being known credentials or good credentials, valid credentials within the network. It's one of the things where you look at, well, why do I have to have a 16-character password? What's the significance of that? Well, that has to do with people that are, much smarter, trying to come up with ways to keep the bad guys out. But when you have a password that's over 16 characters, the algorithm that's in use on the background, say, in your Windows machine or whatever, the algorithm actually is much stronger past 16. The password isn't hashed at that point. It's not stored locally, so it's not something that can be accessed if somebody's trying to snoop for information through somebody's machine or whatever. So there are specific reasons for these measures that are in place, or complexities and things like that, and I wanted to give an example of that. Why do I have to have a 27 character password or whatever? But the magic number is 16. Anything over 16 isn't hashed, so it's not stored locally. You're not able to to break that cipher. It stops at that 16th character, and anything after that isn't there. So that's one of the things where I think if the users had maybe a better understanding, or had more information there and understood, well, this is why it has to be over 16 characters, I think there would be a lot less griping, and the intentional acts of negligence, from that standpoint would definitely go down, or the amount of those incidents would decline.
And how about the compromised insider threat? What are we talking about when we say compromised?
Okay, so compromised threat is unintentional, or it's actually another actor that's using valid credentials, or if you want to put it a different way, authentic credentials into a network or into a system to be able to gain unauthorized access. So that a lot of times goes hand in hand with the negligent user, where if you have the same passwords for multiple systems, or multiple applications, maybe you use the same for your computer and your bank, or something like that, where because of the fact that you're choosing to not really take the security into consideration there, and taking whatever is going to make it easier or simpler for you to be able to remember these different passwords, and using the same password over multiple systems, which definitely in this case would be negligent. That puts me in a situation where if I have my machine which is compromised, or say I have a piece of malware or a virus on my machine that's trying to collect my passwords or trying to gain information, my machine at that point is compromised. However, the next step of that is, as it's collecting those passwords and it's collecting information based on the information that the compromise is collecting on my machine, it's going to start using that information to be able to try to access different machines, to try to use my credentials or passwords. And then it starts to set up and look for different patterns. Like, I am using the same password across multiple domains or multiple systems. Well, okay, well, I know it works in this, so let me try it over here, or let me try to I'm just looking at your information, or that piece of malware is just looking for the user's information, and they're going to try to log in to multiple systems or different places across the network just to see how far they could get and what they could access. In a lot of cases, when you look at a compromise there, that's a malicious actor within a system or within a network that is trying to take advantage of user negligence, and hoping that they use the same credentials in multiple spots, or in different, because in a lot of cases, or the majority of the cases, the credentials that they're getting are not the ones that are going to get them to their target. It's going to allow them to move laterally across the network until they could find the correct information or the correct credentials to be able to get into something else. So the whole point, or that entire game is just trying to get credentials. So you're thinking, okay, well, we're talking about insider threat, but now you're talking about an external actor, or somebody else from another company, a nation state or something like that, gaining access into our system. Well, they're external, yes, and they were compromised the system to be able to get there. So we talk about insider threat based on a compromise. Well, that's the definition of it. You infiltrated a system or a network, but once you're there, the whole goal, what you're doing is using valid credentials to get around a network and be able to fish or try to find different areas within the network so that you could get additional sets of credentials and continue to move around the network until you're able to access the information that you're looking for.
So, Pete, we see a lot about the malicious threat in the media, especially on the federal level. It's given a lot of attention. But it seems like these other two types of threats, they have a tight grip over the federal agency as well. To what extent? How often are these other types of threats happening? Like, how worried should we be?
Okay, yes. So it actually, in the order that we went through these, the different types of insider threat, we actually went from least to most, if you want to put it that way. So if you take it backwards and you start at the end and you start with the compromised insider threat, that's where the majority of your compromises, or the majority of the actions are going to be taken. So in most cases, and the figure is closer to 75 to 80%, when you're looking at these three different types of insider threat, the compromise is going to be the biggest one, and it's going to be the most largely seen. The reason for that is because it's the easiest to be able to accomplish. So it's a lot easier for a hacker to write a piece of malware, or to write a virus or something that's going to come in and it's going to farm for credentials, or it's going to install a keylogger to be able to pick up all the keystrokes and put those into a log or a text file, so that you could go through and try to get banking information or passwords to systems. That can be done anonymously. In a lot of cases it is. and that can be done in a way where it's not able to be traced back, and it's a lot easier to accomplish. That leads to looking at, the second type of insider threat that we had spoken about, which is the negligent insider threat, or just user negligence, where in a lot of cases the compromised or the malicious insider threat, either or, are trying to exploit the negligence of users or systems within a network. However, in a lot of cases, it's easy to guess passwords or patterns on passwords, not randomized, things like that, where you can get a little bit of information and be able to use that information against somebody to be able to try to guess their passwords or to gain access, or to get them to click on that email link so you could exploit their system. So you end up, the negligent insider threat ends up, being used more in, compromise. But that's what you're trying, even when you're looking at it from, the compromise standpoint, that's what you're trying to do, is exploit the negligent user to be able to get that compromise there. But the compromise is, the majority of what the focus is. You could throw different appliances or different solutions at a compromise, but you can't really do that with a negligent user. That's something that's more along the line of user training and security awareness and different programs like that to make sure that the users are aware of this and trying to educate them so it doesn't happen. But the negligent users, the second piece of this, or the second biggest piece, but it's one that I feel that is probably addressed the least. And then, moving to the one that you see the least, but it seems to be the one that makes the most headlines, is the malicious insider threat. And, in the last couple of years, we've had, the two big, when you look at Snowden and Manning, you have two really big cases there, but it's because of the sensitivity of it. And the reason why that gets the most publicity, or you see the most about that, is because basically media outlets are able to put a face to the compromise or to the threat, and be able to sensationalize that and make a news story out of it. I could talk about North Korea trying to, or China or whatever, trying to hack into the government millions of times per year, which happens because they're constantly trying to exploit, get into different systems, or social engineer and stuff like that, trying to farm and gather information. But you're making a generalized statement there, saying, oh well, it's a country or what, and it's not everybody. It sells within these different organizations or different countries or things like that, but you can't really put a face on it. I mean, from a media perspective, how do you talk about something as broad or as general as that? And with all of the amount of effort that goes into that, the small amounts of information that they get out of it isn't as big as somebody walking out of the NSA with a drive that's filled with government secrets. You think, from trying to attack it from a compromise standpoint, or look at it from a compromised insider threat, it may take years, months, decades to be able to gather that intelligence to make it worthwhile, when you have a case of two users that were, or two individuals that were able to get information out to the masses in bulk, and be able to do it by walking out with one drive or whatever, be able to do that. So it's the ability to put the face to the name is what, or it is what makes it so easy to be able to spread that story around. But it's just the sheer amount of information that came out of that and the effect that had on a lot of our government programs is what made that so sensational. It made it such a large news story where you could do that information comes out, that story, all that information's there immediately, where in order to create a story or to be able to uncover and show the entire the entire system or the entire process for the other two types of insider threat, it's a lot harder to explain and a lot harder to be able to put out there in a way that general population would understand and be able to believe or have enough knowledge to really see how big of a story that is and how big of a problem it is. So it's really kind of an issue of perspective.
Right. Well, it's tough, right? Because there are so many fronts from which the insider attack can come. So, in your opinion, where does the responsibility lie for stopping insider threats? Is it with HR? Is it with employees or managers? Who attacks that?
So really it needs to come from the highest levels within the organization. And the reason why I say that is because you could have HR, you could have a security, an information security officer, a CISO, or you could have different groups that are saying, okay, well, we need to be secure. These are the things, but you have to have the buy-in from the highest level in order to make that idea or that thought become a reality, to be honest. So if you have an IT staff that's trying to put security measures in place, but that's the direction of IT, and they're trying to push their direction and try to act in what they think is in the best interest of I'll just say a company for this, then if you have somebody else who is at a higher level, at a VP or in a C-level position, that they're more worried about bottom dollar or production, or they're looking at it from a financial standpoint, they're not going to want to spend the money to be able to put these measures in place, and B, the first time that something happens that gets blamed on security or an appliance or some sort of solution that they have there to protect the business, their first thing that they're going to say is, well, this is affecting our ability to do business, or we cannot stop. We can't have measures in place that are going to stop our employees from being productive. So when you're looking at it, it really has to be supported from the highest level, so that there's no way to get around those measures or be able to either socially or from a political side within corporation be able to get around it. It's something that has to be in place and pushed from the top down, so that there is no way to be able to circumvent those measures.
Yeah, so you're saying responsibility is spread across the organization. It can't just be IT, but you need the buy-in from that leadership?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It is definitely everyone's responsibility, but even if, I've worked for organizations where, we did user training, we did everything, but as soon as, it came to dollars and cents, then that sensibility went out the window. And, groups were able to get around that. Developers were trying to develop things on their own or in the cloud, and there was no oversight. And without those checks and balances, there's no way to ever be able to protect yourself.
Yeah, so that's a pretty tall order, trying to take that security, I guess, paradigm, for lack of a better word, and make it like integral to the organization. How do you do that? Like, what does that process look like?
You're talking about a paradigm shift, or a shift in the way that organizations do business. And, as mentioned, it really needs to start from the top down. You can't have a single group of, either IT, security group, or even the employees. You could train, or you could have a bunch of different measures in place, but unless you have that buy-in from the top, you're not going to be able to make that happen. So what really needs to happen is going to be a combination of buy-in and education of the leaders, whether it's a leader of a country, whether it's the leader of a corporation, or the leader of a team. Everybody has to be on the same page, and they all have to have the same vision in the end in order to make this work. It is a tall order. There's a lot going on, and it's only getting worse. So, when you're looking at it, there are different solutions out there that we could talk about that are more effective than others. Different things within that we're seeing being released from different manufacturers that have new ways of looking at things or being able to uncover or identify things, and we could go and talk that way. But before we do that, I have to go back and say, that it has to be done from the top down. It has to be a similar vision or singular vision. Really has to be hand in hand from the top down.
Sure. Well, short of that cultural shift, just from a more technological perspective, what are the solutions currently in place that IT teams have implemented on a federal level?
So the biggest shift that we've seen in the last couple of years is the understanding and the requirement to be able to identify the traffic that's going across the network. So for many years, you had IT teams that had all of these different applications or different parts of the network or enclaves, and it's like, okay, well, I'll throw a box in front of it and it'll kind of block some things from going through, but there's not really that great of checks and balances. So we'll just, as long as we put a firewall in place or something like that, we'll say that we're secure. And what we have come to find out is that there's a lot of areas that aren't covered, or where those appliances are in place, where you're not able to see what's going on or get a true depiction of that traffic or what's flowing across the network. We've seen a lot of different solutions coming out recently that tend to do that. They're looking at application visibility and things like that, but one of the solutions in particular that are more at the forefront would be Cisco's StealthWatch solution. So we've seen a lot of traction with that, and the reason why we've seen a shift to this type of a security model or this type of a solution is because you have to have that visibility into all of the network or all of the traffic going across your network. If you don't have that, you're blind to a lot of different things. So I can't tell you how many different situations where I've gone into an IT shop and asked, okay, well, can you tell me all the applications going across the network? Or if we need to put this appliance in, can you tell me what we need to open up so that we don't stop production from working on your side? And it's one of those things where the majority of the time the answer is no, well, we don't know everything, or we think we know or whatever, and then you end up putting a solution in place. You put a StealthWatch in place, something that's able to look at every flow going across the network. It's not just a boundary. It's not only grabbing, or looking at north and south traffic. It's also looking at the east and west. So in traditional security stacks, when you look at it, you're blocking traffic from going one way, and it's usually from the inside to the outside. So, from your users to the internet, or from your users to a group of applications or something of that sort. And that's what we would call the north and south traffic. East and west is everything else in between. So it's my computer going to the printer. It's my computer accessing, the HR database, or, shared files, or, different corporate applications that we're using. Well, that's been a blind spot for a very long time, and the solutions that have been in place have been very obtrusive when you think about it from that. Well, I want to put a firewall in between all my users and my data center, or all the applications that we use. Well, the first time that something happens, well, the firewall gets blamed, or it's this appliance that you put in. StealthWatch is different from that. The way that StealthWatch works is it has these different sensors across the network, and it's looking at every piece of traffic that's going across the network. So it's identifying the user information, who the user is, where they're going, what they're accessing, how much of that they're accessing. Are they pulling down, maybe 1 or 2 Word documents a day that might be a meg or a couple of megs? Or are they transferring hundreds of gigs worth of, install files? Or, in a development stack, you see this all the time where they're moving different images for, softwares that they're creating, or different, pieces of hardware or code or things like that. So it allows you to look at an individual, either, user from that example standpoint, or from, the machine standpoint. From anything that's sending any sort of traffic across the network, it's able to see. It takes the information from these different sensors that you put across the network, pulls them into a single dashboard. It correlates all the information, and it gives you the entire picture of everything going on across your network. So it's identifying all the applications, all the users. And then, from there, that's, half the battle, is knowing what's going on within the network and having that visibility and being able to identify all that. You can now, as you're thinking about it, okay, well, I know everything that's going across the network at this point. We've never had this visibility before. This is completely different. This is great. Oh my God, we have, you look at all this data we have. The next thing is, what do you do with it? So that's the next piece where it really stands out. I could put an appliance that just collects NetFlow on the network, and it's a dumb appliance. All it's doing is just logging the data. If I want to, I could search it if I think there's an issue, or maybe the link between 2 offices is completely saturated, or someone can't get to the internet, and we look and our utilization's 100%. Well, I could use that if I know what I'm looking for and try to identify data. But that's not really helpful with trying to be proactive, and it does not help you whatsoever when you're trying to identify any anomalies or any malicious activity across the network. So where StealthWatch takes that to the next level, or takes the next step in that evolution, is it's correlating all this data, and now it's starting to map the pieces together. It's starting to create profiles. It's starting to basically utilize logic behind it to fingerprint, machines and users across the network. And then you're starting to be able to pick up patterns and correlate and add all this data together. Well, I know, that, Martin, when you come in, you access a couple of the file shares, and then you hit, you print out some information, and you may, visit Facebook and stuff like that. Well, you have all that, and you're able to create a baseline for these users, or for the different machines across the network. Well, StealthWatch takes that even a step further. On top of that, once, you're taking and you're creating these baselines and creating these profiles for your users, or, for these machines across the network, well, we know for the last 30 days, you've accessed 5 things within the network. So on day 31, you come in and you start trying to hit HR files, or you start trying to look through different file shares, different things like that, where you typically, when you look over the history of, your activity across the network, it's not normal for you to do that. So that right there is an anomaly. So we're going to flag that. We're going to identify that. We're going to start to make this information that we're gathering. Yes, we're gathering all this information, and it's great. Well, now we need to make it intelligent. We need to make it actionable, and we have to be able to present it in a way to where it's not providing too much information. When you look at the raw flows themselves, there's a lot of information in there, but I don't want to look at all that. I just want to know what's important and what I need to, pay attention to, or what I need to take action on. And that's really what this solution does. It takes all that information and it makes it usable. It correlates all of it. It identifies anomalies, not only by, my example there was saying, okay, well, your account started accessing, different things. So that could have been negligent. that could have been malicious. Maybe you're trying to pull information. Maybe, Joe, who sits next to you, has the same job as you, but maybe you want to know how much they make so that you could figure out, and use that information for personal gain or whatever. That's, another way to be able to utilize that. Or, from that perspective, well, maybe it isn't you. Maybe it's malicious, maybe your machine has been compromised. So, you work 8 to 5, maybe it's not only looking at HR files, but it's doing it at 6 p.m. and you're not in the office. So let's start taking this information and making it usable, making it actionable, and allowing us to use the data that's already been there for years that we just haven't had a way to leverage.
Mm-hmm. So that pattern recognition aspect, the anomaly detection, is that unique to StealthWatch? In other words, how does StealthWatch compare to other solutions on the market?
So there are other solutions that allow you to look at the traffic across the network, but it's in the majority of cases, it's only in certain places across the network where typically you don't have multiple sensors. You may have a firewall set up that's capturing some of the traffic. Maybe it's a boundary firewall or an internet-facing firewall. So you're seeing that traffic, but you're not seeing everything go lateral or go east-west across the network. So there are solutions that can do pieces of this, but by doing pieces of it, you're only seeing pieces of information or pieces of the puzzle. You're not getting the entire story. So on top of the fact that you have a full solution like this that is able to give you complete visibility across the network, you have the different intelligence that's behind the StealthWatch product now, which is not only what were the LANCOPE engineers and what was originally LANCOPE before Cisco acquired it. Now they've added that group in. They've added it in with the Cisco Talos group, which is one of the largest security organizations in the world. That group is analyzing trillions of files and pieces of information a day that they're seeing from having the largest global customer base in the world from an IT and security perspective, taking all that information as well, and they're using that, and they're using the signatures and the anomalies or the malicious findings that they have, and they're feeding and building that information in the StealthWatch as well. So you not only have a singular or point product that is a singular solution or part of a solution set. It's being fed by everything else within the Cisco security ecosystem, and that's a really strong story. That's a lot of intelligence that they're putting behind a singular platform.
Yeah, wow. So it sounds like there's a huge amount of expertise behind this and driving StealthWatch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. The bigger piece of that, or if you want to expand upon that a little bit more, not only the intelligence that's being put into StealthWatch that's being identified by the other Cisco solutions, there's been an incredible amount of work being done within the integration of these solutions within the Cisco ecosystem or the Cisco architecture, where StealthWatch now is able to, when it identifies something, notify another appliance or another solution that Cisco has, and that's able to enforce or take action on an endpoint based on what StealthWatch is seeing. So if it's seeing anomalous behavior, or if it's seeing traffic coming from an endpoint that indicates that there's a virus on it or a piece of malware, or it's trying to phone home or go back to a command and control server, that information will be passed along to ICE. Well, the solution is Cisco ICE. It'll be passed along to that, and ICE has the ability to shut the computer off of the network, to shut down the port, to quarantine it, to take action on it, to send it so that it alerts somebody or whatever. So not only do you have all of the intelligence and what you're seeing within StealthWatch itself, it's integrated with ICE, or it's integrating with their firewalls and things like that, where it's taking the information and making it actionable and automating a lot of that process. So it's identifying it, it's alerting you, but it's able to, if you enable it, to be a piece that will allow to automate your security remediation, and that's an extremely powerful story when you're talking about being able to identify something on a machine and then go through your remediation efforts. And going across and manually looking across a bunch of different machines across the network to, okay, as soon as it's identified on this first machine, we're going to stop it before it could spread or go anywhere else. We're going to automate that and then let you know. So, okay, we've already taken action. We've taken care of this. It's sitting over, in this enclave where it can't get to anything else and is not able to impact anything else. You guys just have to go get it now. So when you look at that from an operational standpoint, it's a huge success story, being able to take, either time to detect a threat and take action on it and identify what it is, to being able to, automatically remediate it rather than having to find it and then have that gap of time in between to be able to detect and then fully remediate something that's going on across the network.
So as an engineer, what of those integrations is your favorite? What excites you the most about StealthWatch?
The thing that excites me the most in having an operational background with StealthWatch is the visibility and the correlations and the intelligence behind the platform itself. I've been in a situation where my company had been compromised, and we had movement across the network and trying to get access to different things and trying to, basically steal our intellectual property. Having that visibility would have prevented a lot of this, and it would have saved me a lot of headache and a lot of sleepless nights trying to remediate things if I knew where they were to begin with, and not trying to, chase ghosts across the network. That's hugely, that would have been one of the saving graces for going through, a situation like that, or having to go through and being able to do a full remediation across a business that had, multiple offices, and it was international. So anything could go anywhere within the network, and you have no visibility. You have no idea really what's going on. You're trying to, do the best to protect it, but don't really have that visibility. As far as the integration, the thing that excites me the most is the automation piece and the integration between StealthWatch and ICE. Being able to identify and see that information and then have something like Cisco ICE take action on it and completely automate that process and be able to protect you without having to have human intervention. It is just huge. I mean, you talk about AI or artificial intelligence, which is becoming larger and larger within the security realm. But we have a solution here between, StealthWatch and ICE that's already capable of doing that. And it's here today. It's not something like we're looking at, Terminator or something like that, or we're waiting on something in 2022 to come out that's going to be able to do that. We have this capability today, and it's something that I think a lot more organizations should be leveraging.
So the capabilities that StealthWatch gives an IT team as far as visibility is concerned, do you think that that's going to further the cause of getting buy-in from leadership at all, or do you think this is kind of siloed to the IT team?
No, I 100% think that it'll further the cause of getting buy-in, especially from the executive level. So not only is it a cool, little techie tool that, our security guys could geek out on or nerd out on, it's one of the things that when you look at the intelligence or reporting behind it, the, graphical information that it gives you, being able to take that information in a report format and give that to your CISO or give it to the CIO or whatever, whoever, you may need to be reporting into, being able to provide that in the form of pretty pictures or graphical information, and not just the security engineer saying, oh yeah, we're secure, we're protected. I got you on this one. You actually have the data to be able to back you up and be able to prove that you are. So you're able to leverage the network, leverage the investments that you have within your infrastructure, and be able to prove that you are secure, or in the case of anything, say any sort of a compromise would happen, that it was remediated and it's not being seen anymore.
Great. Well, Pete, thanks for talking with us.
All right. Thank you very much, Martin.
Again, that was Pete Burke, a senior technical consultant at Force 3, and you've been listening to Through the Firewall.
This has been Through the Firewall with Force 3.